Imagine the world shrouded in the silence of stone, 1,000 church bells sleeping beneath the weight of fog. The year is somewhere around 1000 AD. The world has survived the fall of Rome, the raids of Vikings, the hunger of centuries. But Europe is still haunted. It is a continent caught between memory and myth. The ashes of empire lie cold, and over them, men build again, timid, fractured, suspicious of the dark. You can almost feel the chill of those times, can't you? The smell of wet earth, the creak of wooden carts, the heavy toll of a church bell echoing across a valley untouched by time. Peasants bend their backs beneath the sky, their world bound by the church tower and the manor wall. To be born here is to inherit struggle, a quiet, enduring servitude to seasons, hunger, and faith. The old gods have been buried, but their whispers remain. Christianity rules, but its roots are still shallow, and in the shadows of forests and mountains, old rituals breathe. The people fear the devil as much as they crave the mercy of God. The church stands as both savior and jailer. Imagine a Europe without light, only candles, only superstition, only whispers of salvation. The Pope in Rome dreams of order, but kings and dukes have their own ambitions. Every hill has its lord, every castle its rival. This is not yet a world of nations, but of fiefdoms, of oaths sworn with trembling hands. Loyalty is a weapon, and betrayal a tradition. A man's word can bind him for life, or send him to the gallows. Across the misty fields of France, armored riders thunder past muddy huts, banners fluttering with the emblems of forgotten houses. These are the knights, the armored skeletons of medieval legend, but beneath the iron and chivalry, there's blood, mud, and the unending scream of war. Honor is just a thin veneer painted over brutality. In England, a distant king claims divine right, while Norman invaders sharpen their blades across the Channel. Soon, the world will hear the name William, the conqueror, and everything will change. The clash of iron on iron, the thunder of hooves across Hastings Hill, the red dawn of a new feudal order. From those ashes rises a new Europe, structured, cruel, but coherent. The hierarchy hardens like cooling metal. God at the top, then king, lord, knight, peasant. A ladder that can only be climbed by birth or blood. But under all this, something vast begins to stir. The church grows fat on gold and fear. Its cathedrals rise higher than the trees, defying the sky. Imagine the awe of a peasant standing before Notre Dame for the first time. Stone carved into prayer, windows lit with stories of saints and suffering. The medieval mind saw no boundary between miracle and reality. The relic of a saint could heal, the curse of a priest could kill. To question was to risk eternal damnation. Knowledge itself became dangerous. Yet in the quiet corners of monasteries, monks bend over parchment, copying the words of long-dead Romans, preserving the memory of a world long vanished. They do not know it, but they are saving civilization. Meanwhile, across the Mediterranean, the Islamic world burns bright, a beacon of science, philosophy, and trade. Their cities glitter with light while Europe stumbles in darkness, and that contrast becomes unbearable. In 1095, a voice echoes from Clermont. Pope Urban Seberai calls for holy war, a crusade. The crowd roars like thunder. For the first time in centuries, Europe unites under a single cause: reclaim the Holy Land. Tens of thousands answer the call. Peasants, knights, thieves, zealots. They march east beneath the cross, their armor gleaming, their souls trembling. What begins as faith soon becomes frenzy. Blood baptizes the sands of Jerusalem. The cry of Deus Vult, God wills it, turns men into monsters. The Crusades awaken something ancient in Europe, a hunger for destiny, for conquest, for glory beneath God's gaze. When they return home, they bring back more than relics. They bring silk, spices, science, and ideas that will quietly undermine the world that sent them. Trade routes reopen. Cities grow. Power begins to shift. The church still rules from the heavens, but below, money begins to whisper. The merchant becomes a new kind of knight, a warrior of gold instead of steel. Towns become cities, guilds replace oaths, and across the continent the rhythm of life begins to quicken. But even as civilization stirs, the shadows deepen. For every cathedral that rises, there's a dungeon beneath it. For every knight who prays, there's a warlord who burns villages for sport. The medieval world is not one of peace. It's a constant balancing act between piety and predation. In the frozen castles of the north, lords whisper about power and inheritance. Dynasties begin to dream of crowns larger than their lands. The seeds of kingdoms are being planted in blood and ambition. England's kings war with France for centuries, birthing legends and ghosts. Agincourt, Crusades, the Black Prince, Joan of Arc. The 100 Years' War is not just a struggle for territory, it's the death throes of the old order. Yet the people, the countless, nameless millions who plough the fields and bury the dead, endure it all. Famine comes. Winter stretches too long. Crops rot, and entire villages vanish into hunger. And then comes something worse. The year is 1347. A ship docks in Sicily. Rats scurry across the harbour ropes, their fleers carrying death itself. Within months, the plague spreads like wildfire across Europe. Towns are emptied, streets littered with the dead. 1/3 of the continent is erased. Priests die praying, kings die hiding, and faith itself begins to tremble. The survivors see the plague as God's punishment, or worse, as proof that God is gone. The medieval soul fractures. You can almost hear the silence that follows. Cities so empty you can hear the wind whispering through broken church doors. But from that silence comes change. The plague, for all its horror, becomes the great equalizer. Labor becomes precious. Serfs demand wages. The hierarchy cracks. The church, unable to protect its flock, loses its divine shield. Questions begin to rise. Soft at first, then louder. What if salvation doesn't come from Rome? What if truth lies not in faith, but in reason? It's dangerous thinking, but it's spreading like fire beneath the surface. This is the beginning of the end for the medieval world, the slow unraveling of the 1,000-year night. But before dawn can rise, the darkness must have its final hour. The bells toll over empty towns, their echoes wandering through streets that no longer have names. The dead are buried in pits, the living walk like ghosts. But somehow, life claws its way back. Fields once abandoned bloom again. Children are born who will never know the stench of the plague, only the fear it left behind. Europe breathes, but it is changed, scarred, restless, suspicious of its own gods. The peasants who survived begin to see themselves differently. They are no longer expendable hands of the soil. They have power now, the power to refuse, to demand, to walk away. Lords who once commanded now plead. The old world begins to crack under the weight of survival. In the shadows of the monasteries, books are copied still, but the words have begun to change, not just prayers or sermons, but questions. What is man? What is truth? Why must the church own the keys to heaven? You can almost hear the scratching of quills as dangerous ideas take shape. And in Italy, something stirs, something brighter than all the candles of Europe combined. Florence, Venice, Genoa, cities of stone and ambition, become laboratories of human genius. Gold flows through their streets, art blossoms from marble, and the soul of Europe begins to awaken from its 1,000-year sleep. But make no mistake, the Middle Ages do not end quietly. They end in fire and in blood. The church, threatened by change, tightens its grip. Heretics burn on pyres. The Inquisition sharpens its tools, hunting thoughts as if they were demons. Across the land, fear once again becomes faith's companion. Yet the more the church burns, the brighter knowledge glows. The writings of Aristotle, long buried in Arabic translations, find their way back to Europe. Scholars in Paris and Oxford read words older than Christianity itself. The human mind, long chained by faith, begins to stretch. The medieval world had once believed that God's plan was everything, but now man begins to wonder if he, too, can shape destiny. In the courts of kings, something shifts. Royalty begins to look beyond divine right. They crave control, order, legacy. Centralized power grows. England's kings tangle with parliaments. France's monarchs tighten their grip over their lands. The Holy Roman Empire, that sprawling ghost of Rome, becomes a labyrinth of power, half sacred, half political, and in its heart ambition festers. Yet, even as kingdoms rise, the battlefield remains Europe's truest language. Steel speaks louder than scripture. The longbow, the pike, the cannon, they begin to rewrite the rules of war. No longer the duels of knights in glittering armor. Now, war belongs to mud, smoke, and common men. The chivalric code, once the pride of noble blood, is dying beneath gunpowder's roar. You can almost see it, a line of armored knights charging through the fog, only to be shredded by iron pellets from afar. The old world crumbles, not with a single strike, but with 1,000 small deaths. Yet through this chaos, stories still rise. Joan of Arc, a peasant girl hearing voices from heaven, leading armies against England, defying kings, only to burn at the stake. Her ashes scatter into the wind, but her legend never dies. She becomes the spirit of a changing world, a world where destiny no longer belongs solely to nobles or priests. Meanwhile, in the north, the Hanseatic merchants build a new kind of empire, not of swords, but of trade routes. Gold replaces glory, silk, furs, spices. They move across seas and roads once haunted by raiders. Wealth begins to mean more than bloodline. A new class is born, the bourgeois, the city dwellers, the builders of a new order that does not yet have a name. And yet, for every light that flickers, shadows linger. Witch trials sweep through villages. Fear of women, of knowledge, of the unseen. Europe's soul still battles its own reflection. The devil becomes the scapegoat of progress. Every birth of an idea demands the death of superstition. But superstition does not go quietly. As the 15th century dawns, whispers of rebellion spread against the church, against the system, against the ancient order that has ruled since the fall of Rome. Gutenberg's press clatters into existence, a machine of ink and revolution. For the first time in 1,000 years, knowledge is no longer chained to monasteries. The printed word spreads like wildfire. Ideas that once took decades to copy now reach thousands in days. Europe begins to think together, to argue, to awaken. The Middle Ages, this long twilight of faith and fear, has reached its final act. But before the Renaissance can rise, before humanism can claim the crown, the medieval world will give one last, desperate scream. Across the east, a shadow moves, the Ottoman Turks, their banners black against the dawn. They sweep through the remnants of Byzantium, the last jewel of Rome's broken crown. Constantinople falls in 1453. The gateway between worlds, between east and west, is shattered. The shock echoes through every court and monastery. To some, it feels like the end of days. To others, it is the signal that a new world must be found. Sailors whisper of routes beyond the known seas. Scholars speak of rediscovering the wisdom of the ancients. The old order trembles. And somewhere, in the silence between ages, you can almost hear the sound of pages turning, the world shedding its skin. The 1,000-year night of medieval Europe begins to fade into the dim glow of morning. But what a night it has been, lit by torches, haunted by faith, and filled with the cries of men who built the bones of the modern world without ever knowing it. The Middle Ages are dying, but they will never truly be gone. Their echoes live in every church bell, every stone castle, every tale of knights and kings that still whispers through our imaginations. 1,000 years of darkness, of devotion, of destiny. And from that darkness the modern world is born. The last shadows of the Middle Ages stretch long across Europe. The smell of smoke and parchment fills the air. Something vast is ending, something older than memory. The world that once turned on prayer and sword now trembles beneath the weight of discovery. The printing press hums like a heartbeat. The written word, once the privilege of monks, now finds its way into the hands of merchants, scholars, and dreamers. It is a quiet revolution, a war fought not with blades, but with ideas, and ideas they do not die easily. In the north, reformers murmur that the church has lost its way. In the universities, students argue that truth might exist beyond scripture. And in the cities, a strange hunger grows, not for salvation, but for understanding. The medieval mind, chained for 1,000 years to faith and fear, begins to stir. The human soul demands more than penance. It demands purpose. But the old world does not surrender gracefully. The church fights to keep its dominion, declaring new crusades, not against Islam this time, but against thought itself. Heresy becomes a word sharper than any sword. The Inquisition hunts not just witches now, but thinkers. The fires that once burned heretics in the name of purity now consume scholars in the name of order. And yet, even as the flames rise, knowledge spreads faster than it can be silenced. The Renaissance, still young, still fragile, creeps across Italy like dawn over a battlefield. Florence glows with marble and madness. Da Vinci sketches dreams of flight, while sculptors carve men into gods. The human form, once a vessel of sin, becomes sacred again, a reflection of divine perfection. Man begins to see himself not as a shadow of heaven, but as a maker of worlds. It is as if, after 1,000 years of looking upward, humanity dares to look inward. The medieval age, that long night of devotion, begins to dissolve in the light of self-discovery. But this rebirth comes at a price. As knowledge spreads, so too does conflict. The same fire that kindled genius ignites war. Nations, real nations, begin to form from the ashes of feudal kingdoms. France, England, Spain, they rise with banners, borders, and blood. The old loyalties of fealty and vassalage crumble before the power of kings who dream of absolute rule. The knight, once the symbol of European honor, becomes obsolete, a relic of an age that no longer fits the rhythm of the new world. His armor, his code, his oaths, all rust beneath the march of gunpowder and statecraft. The castles that once guarded valleys now stand like tombstones of a forgotten faith in chivalry. You can almost hear the echo of hooves fading across time, the last ride of the medieval warrior into myth. But the church endures, though wounded. Its cathedrals still rise over every city, its bells still toll the hours of men, yet its authority begins to fracture. In the whispers of scholars and the songs of poets, in the silent rebellion of the painter's brush, the divine monopoly begins to erode. The spirit of inquiry, once a spark, becomes wildfire. Men begin to map the stars, not for prophecy, but for navigation. They no longer fear the edge of the world. They seek it. Ships set sail beyond the known seas. The compass replaces the cross. The medieval mind believed the world was closed, encircled by the will of God. But now it opens, infinite and terrifying. This is not merely the end of an era. It is the end of a worldview. Imagine standing at the threshold of that change, one foot in a world of relics and saints, the other in a world of science and discovery. Europe teeters between salvation and reason, between eternity and evolution. It is both birth and funeral, both dawn and dusk. The 1,000 years of the Middle Ages fade into memory, but their bones remain beneath our feet. Their echoes lie in the architecture of our cities, in the prayers that still rise in cathedrals, in the very language of our laws and morals, for all its superstition, its violence, its darkness. The medieval world gave shape to the West's soul. It built cathedrals not only of stone but of belief. It taught mankind that meaning must be earned, that faith can outlast empire. And even as it collapsed, it planted the seeds of everything to come. The Renaissance, the Reformation, the Enlightenment. The end of medieval Europe was not a fall, it was a transformation. like a star collapsing into itself before exploding into light. The peasants who once tilled the land now read books. The merchants who once counted coins now fund voyages that will redraw the world. The kings who once claimed divine right now face the birth of something unimaginable. Citizens. 1,000 years of struggle, of prayer, of plague and perseverance, all converging into one impossible truth, that civilization never dies. It changes form, sheds skin, and rises again from its own ruins. The medieval world may seem distant, a relic buried beneath layers of history, but its heartbeat still echoes in our own. Every debate over power and faith, every monument to beauty, every law written in moral ink, all of it whispers of those centuries when mankind wrestled with darkness and dared to imagine light. The story of medieval Europe is not just the story of knights and kings. It is the story of survival, of a species learning to live after the fall of its first great empire, learning to hope again in the face of fear. It is the story of how, in the long silence after Rome, humanity found its voice again. Listen closely, and you can still hear it. The toll of distant bells, the rustle of parchment, the faint echo of iron striking iron, the heartbeat of 1,000 years that refused to die. The Middle Ages are gone, but their shadow still stretches across time, shaping who we are, reminding us that every age, no matter how dark, carries within it the seed of its own rebirth. If you could step back into that 1,000-year night, would you survive it? Would you kneel to faith or fight for reason? The echoes of medieval Europe still shape every choice we make. Its ghosts whisper in our politics, our cathedrals, our very sense of right and wrong. History never dies, it only sleeps. If this journey through the shadows moved you, then step deeper with us. Subscribe to Unsolved History, where we awaken the forgotten ages and uncover the truths the centuries tried to bury. Tell us, what world should we unearth next?